Good evening, everyone. This is your host, Sonia Cotto of the Psychedelic Healing podcast. Tonight, I'm here with Dr. Katherine McLean, PhD. She is a pioneering neuroscientist with her expertise in studying not only just mindful meditation, but psychedelics and their effects on cognitive performance, emotional well-being, spirituality, and brain function. She has written a book, and I was it was so moving for me to read, Midnight Water, a Psychedelic Memoir. It's a story of grief and redemption by a groundbreaking scientist, which it definitely is, and we'll explain more later. She's at the forefront of psychedelic research. She was one of the, is it really appropriate to say OGs in the psychedelic
I know, I
space?
say that too, but I never know.
Right? But you really were one of the, beginning, especially as a female researcher in the psychedelic space that was very male dominated in the very beginning. So you are the OG. This is an amazing, compelling story of her psychedelic healing. Welcome, Dr. Katherine McLean.
Thank you so much. And this is normally past my bedtime. So I feel like, I'm being a bit of a rebel again. It's like staying up late. Don't want my kids are somewhere else. This is how life changes,
Oh, yes. I'm usually getting ready for bed at this time as well. So we're out wild and crazy tonight. So congratulations on this book. It was absolutely amazing. I cried multiple times. I laughed a lot, and I learned a lot, actually. So thank you for all of that.
Awesome.
First of all, it starts off with your loss. I'm so sorry to lose your sister. I cried so much, just to put it out there, just at the idea, because while you were, writing about your loss and going through the process, I was devastating, really feeling like, oh my gosh, at the loss of my sister, I couldn't even imagine. So thank you for just, putting it on the pages. But that's kind of where your psychedelic healing started, but not really. Why don't you explain how you kind of...
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that before my sister got sick and I saw face to face, what suffering and death looked like. Before that, I was kind of just experimenting, playing, learning, witnessing, sitting for other people. It was all fun and games until it wasn't. And I think that now there's a part of me that's kind of matured beyond that stage, but I still feel nostalgic for it. So when people are still in the fun and game stage with psychedelics, I want them to really enjoy that, because it does get harder as you go. You learn more, and eventually there are things that you see that you can't unsee. You can't unknow those things. So enjoy the fun times. That's my kind of recommendation for people who are just starting out, and don't forget that that's also really valuable. But, for me, things got very serious kind of all of a sudden. And thankfully, I had already had experience with psychedelics myself and at Hopkins. So I kind of knew exactly how to apply them in my own healing journey, which isn't to say that I knew the recipe, but I knew the ingredients. And I kind of started playing with the ingredients to figure out what kind of nourishment I wanted to create for my life. People read the book, they'll realize there are a lot of ingredients. It's not just one and done with psilocybin. It's not just 2 doses of MDMA. Once you kind of get started, you realize there's a huge territory to cover. But yeah, thanks to my sister, I embarked on a journey that I might not otherwise have.
Yeah, it was definitely beautiful to see that, and just see the relationships that you had, and you really got started. I mean, what kind of blew my mind, and I've been kind of tapping more into, is the whole meditation that you started. That was really what your research started in, was meditation, correct?
That is correct. And it's funny, because if I had come along 10 years later, I probably would have gone straight into psychedelic research. But at the time, no one was really doing psychedelic research. So even meditation was taboo. Mindfulness was taboo. Now it's like old hat. Everyone meditates. Everyone knows mindfulness. There are a million apps that you can use. But it's funny to remember and remind people that even 20 years ago, things were really different. You couldn't just talk about meditation research. And so in a way, I think the meditation helped me kind of get used to the kind of criticism and, kind of the discrimination against certain types of science. So then when I jumped into the psychedelic world, I was like, oh, come on, I'm used to this. Everyone's going to say, no, you can't do that. That's too woo. And then they'll eventually come around. And so now we've come around in psychedelics. So it's like, yeah, that's what happens. People get more open-minded. They get okay with these kind of weird topics.
It's actually all over media now. It's psychedelics here, psychedelics there, and that's what motivated me for this podcast, right? Because they were saying a lot of things that, you say the fun stage, and it's beautiful and fun when you're young and you're not really looking for growth and needing the growth or searching for that. But when it comes out and you're not ready for it, that's why I'm here, to educate those, to prepare for that setting. Before we dive into that, I did have a question, because since you are the master meditator, research person, I have been with certain people talk about, okay, the psychedelics are really to assist the meditation aspect. Like, you can actually get into that transcendent space in your subconscious mind and get into the different levels of awareness just through meditation. And have you found that? Have you actually experienced that with meditation?
Well, it's interesting. I think maybe it's my personality, my brain chemistry, and my life experiences. But in a way, meditation was always psychedelic for me. And so I think I kind of came at it from a different perspective of, I started having experiences in meditation that I didn't have a reference for outside of psychedelics, but I could point back to psychedelics and say, oh, that kind of reminds me of this experience I had on mushrooms, or this one experience I had meditating was very similar to a DMT experience. And you talk to meditators and they're like, what do you mean? Like, meditation is boring. It's ordinary. Nothing happens. I'm like, I don't know about you, but my brain is fireworks. So, I think they've kind of fed back and forth to each other. And what I would say is that when the psychedelic experience became overwhelming, I would definitely tap back into mindfulness and the breath. And to this day, I mean, my breath is the thing that's with me all the time. So I would say, if there's one thing I've learned from both, it's that you have this target, this grounding vehicle with you all the time. So even when you're alone, even when you're overwhelmed, you can breathe. And I know it sounds kind of simple, but it took a long time to get to that point.
Oh, I realized, yes, in one of my ketamine experiences, I realized that I don't breathe when I was trying to find, it was one of those, just like when I was trying to find what do I need, and the message came loud and clear, breathe. And I catch myself all the time when I'm feeling anxious, I'm holding my breath all the time. Yeah. So breath work is so important. So that's one thing that we try to teach, is taking deep breaths in, like in the meditative space, or breath work, like counting to 6 in, holding 6, then exhaling, all that kind of stuff. It's crazy how meditation and breath work can work.
Well, and also I found with some of the higher dose psychedelics that tend to be dissociative, breath can keep you connected to your body. I don't know if this is always true, but at least for me, sometimes if I'm so far away from my body, psychologically, spiritually, it can be harder to integrate. And so by breathing through the experience and staying connected to my body, the integration ends up being easier. And so I've kind of liked finding that kind of moderately high dose, that I'm not completely, abandoned the earth and my body, but I can still kind of tap back in and know that, I am a human being. I'm going to have to figure out how to feed myself tomorrow, and go to the grocery store and get in a car and put gasoline in my car. And it might be harder the day after, but I could do this. I have a body. I used to actually wish for the totally transcendent experiences because I was in so much pain. And then as I got more friendly with my pain, then I kind of appreciated the moderate doses more, because I said, oh, I'm no longer trying to flee my body. And I think that's maybe something that comes with time, when you begin to learn that getting away from the pain is not going to solve it.
Right. Yeah, you got to feel it. Feel it to heal it. So in all the medicine work that you have done, I know you did in your book kind of say that your favorite is really MDMA is kind of your go-to. But in your research studies that you've done and conducted, for those, let's say, do tend to go towards, all the research, okay, psilocybin for, for addiction, for treatment-resistant depression, or MDMA for PTSD, like those are kind of like the studies that are coming out for the legalization factor. Do you find, for PTSD that it really should, or trauma should really stick with the MDMA, or is it something that with each medicine, what do you think it heals best? If you had to diagnosis.
It's a great question. And I would say I kind of did it backwards. So I started with high dose mushrooms and discovered that I had major, major trauma. I think we're kind of at a turning point in psychology when we're finally admitting that a lot of us have really messed up childhood, even privileged people, even people who had all their basic needs met. A lot of us went through a period of either neglect or outright abuse, or, parents who just didn't know how to manage their own emotions. And without blaming, we can see oh, that's there. It's in the past, but we can heal it. So in a way, I think if I had started with MDMA, I might have had an easier trajectory. But because I was more familiar with psilocybin, I kind of dove into the deep end. And I almost got stuck there, honestly, because I think it was too much, too fast. And it was I saw everything. And so what I would say about MDMA is it ends up being, I wouldn't say, I've heard Rick Doblin say it's more gentle. And I don't think it's gentle, but I do think it's not so in your face. It'll present enough that you can manage in that moment, and then you can go back to it in a few months. At the same time, it happened the way it did. And so I can't second guess my own intuition there. So perhaps for some people, being able to see the whole terrain with mushrooms is helpful. And then you could kind of finish with MDMA once you are really fit and ready for that final lesson. And so I don't know, it's I can see both sides of it. It's worth saying though, at Hopkins, we did not give psilocybin to people with PTSD or complex PTSD. They might have had difficult childhood memories, but that wasn't why they were showing up to us. So I would say it's an open research question still. What types of trauma are best suited for psilocybin or MDMA or something else entirely?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think with the MDMA, because it's such an empathogen, it's loving. I think maybe that's why it might be easier for the trauma when Rick Doblin speaks about that, just because it's more loving and forgiving. I had one patient who experienced it, and they like to describe it her and her husband take it, and that's when they have their deep discussions about what they're upset at each other about, and they come to such a loving agreement of it, and they receive and take what I hate about you when you do this and this and this, and it's and he's oh, I'm so sorry, and they take it in such a loving back and forth manner. So it is I guess a little bit softer, heart love kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess in a way it softens us, so then we can meet MDMA. I think MDMA is a very, very powerful medicine. So when I think about it as very brave, and it will go into the darkest territory, but it softens us to greet what we see there without hatred, without judgment, so we end up being kinder to ourselves, kinder to past versions of ourselves, kinder to people who might have hurt us, without I think it kind of removes, for a temporary period of time, it removes the need to blame or judge or determine who was good or who was bad. You can do that after the fact. You can wrestle with those challenging dynamics afterward. But for a few hours, you could just see things from a very compassionate standpoint. Oh, we're all human. We're all imperfect. And we've all messed up at different points.
Yes. Yeah. So I think that actually also might be beneficial to those that have a lot of anger inside, holding a lot of anger. And, and that's what I try to teach my patients too. It's it only really hurts yourself because the person that you're angry with, that brings all that anger, they have no concept of it. They're living their life. They have no idea that emotion is inside of you, but.
Well, and as you know, having read the book, anger is one of the things that I really wrestled with, eventually saw the power of, befriended. So I think MDMA and mushrooms together are they go at anger from very different angles. And I think it's something that we should tackle head on and stop talking around this issue of anger, but kind of head it on directly.
Oh, yeah, definitely. When you were talking about psilocybin and how you actually were exposed to your trauma that had been buried, right? That's what I want to kind of, talk to our listeners about, because that is always a risk, right? Where you're doing the fun and having a fun experience and lighthearted, and that's what most people do younger. Then there's also those so-called bad trips, which I personally don't think there's a such thing as a bad trip, but, bad setting, bad environment, where you're at, how did you work through it when that came out for you? Because you weren't really expecting that to be there, and all of a sudden this whole trauma emerged, the full memory of it. How are there things like, how did you go through that? What things did you wish you had as support or didn't have, or if you could change, what it was when it came out for you?
I mean, yeah, looking back, I realized that one instinct I had, which I am so thankful for, is that I trusted myself to have one female friend with me in the ceremonial space. And when I look back on the mushroom experience that I had, I said, I wonder why I ended up feeling safe enough to talk about this out loud, to express what I was remembering. It wasn't because of the male shaman in the room, like he was holding the space ritually, but it was because I had a female friend, someone I trusted who was an equal, and I could talk to that woman in the room while whoever was holding the ritual space could just do that job. And, at Hopkins, of course, we have two guides in the room, and I was always taught that it was for different reasons, but what I saw emerge in my own experience was the need for someone whose expertise was in the ritual ceremonial aspects of the experience, and someone else whose expertise was in just being a good friend, like being just a compassionate listener, someone who actually loves you. I mean, hard to find, right? But it's hard to pay for that, So it's interesting that I wonder if we can come up with these models that have maybe the person who's professionally trained and a friend. And so I've asked every researcher, clinician, private practitioner I know, is it possible for people to bring a friend in the room with them? Like, can we consider that as a new model? Because without that, I probably would have stuffed it down, or maybe gotten through the experience and then tried to process it on my own with a therapist afterward or something. Again, looking back, it took me a long time to trust that I could also have an experience on my own without needing anyone in the room. And it's tricky to say. I think it's better to start with people there. I don't really think it's a good idea for anyone to trip solo the first few times. But to also remember that at some point, you yourself are the only one who can really know how okay you are with certain memories, certain feelings. And especially with MDMA is a great friend to have in a room. And so great to have someone around, but you could probably be by yourself for a couple hours in a safe place with someone maybe, in the next room or in the same house. So just kind of, I think that idea of there being a safe, friendly home environment is something that I instinctively searched out that worked for me. And of course, it's tricky in the legal medical environment. Like, how do you recreate a home environment with friends? Like,
right, exactly. Yeah, putting a bed in a clinic room, and even in my ketamine clinic, we try to make it comfortable, like, recliners and, but it's still not your home, not your space, not your environment, but trying to make it as comfortable as possible. So did you always have, like, when you had the two, was it always two therapists, or was it like one therapist and one like sitter guide in there, or were they two licensed?
So at Hop, the head guides for the longest time were two clinicians. So Mary Casamano was a social worker, licensed social worker. Bill Richards was a pastoral counselor. Around the time I arrived, we needed to expand the study. So I was one of the first non-licensed, non-clinically trained head guides. But I also had all the meditation background and the self-experimentation. So in a way, I had been kind of training myself, but I still did supervision with Bill and Mary. Like I assisted them before I was kind of approved to guide on my own with my assistant guide. And so I do think the apprenticeship model works, but there was always so much team support around that if anything came up, I could ask Mary, I could ask Bill, I could ask Roland. There were tons of postdocs who were clinically trained. So it wasn't like, train for a couple of years and then start your own clinic. And so I appreciate both sides. I think I appreciate that maybe having a clinical licensure model is probably the safest for now. But I know deep down that in another 5 to 10 years, we'll probably start seeing a lot more ordinary people being trained and that being a possibility.
Well, there's so many training programs now for anybody that wants to go into integration and just psychedelic, there's so much content out there to learn. So that being said, obviously we have the clinical model and it's not yet legalized, but right now we have a lot of states that are decriminalizing the psilocybin. So that is also why I started this podcast as well, because I have had some patients going to, different countries. And, I had one patient administered 17 grams of psilocybin.
Wow.
In Costa Rica. Yes. So when he came to me in a pure traumatic, so much like he was just suffering a lot, thinking that he needed a ketamine infusion, I said, no, you just need integration. And it was planned for 3 weeks post. Like, what are you supposed to do for 3 weeks after you've had that kind of a dose? So I actually set him up and he's been doing integration because that's kind of more what he needs, right?
Right.
So as far as, going, that being said, is those that are searching for experiences, right, where the states are decriminalizing, what are some of the things that you find that's most important, especially for a woman, right?
Yeah.
For, when you're looking for, I want to do a ceremony, or I want to try an experience, or I want to try these, psychedelics, what are like the most important thing, that you would tell someone?
Well, I think first of all, stay as close to home as you can. Make sure that it's an environment that even if you have to travel like a couple hours by car, it's a place that you can kind of get home if you needed to, or you could call a friend to come pick you up. I know it's not ideal. There's all these beliefs about like interrupting an experience, but like on my meditation retreat, it would have probably been good for a friend to come pick me up. Like I made it through and I got a lot out of it, but not necessary to put yourself through that. I would suggest, like I said, bring a friend, bring someone you trust, have someone else in the room that so it's not all strangers. Certainly do your background checks on the people who are holding the space. Right now it's really unfortunate, but there continue to be more and more practitioners who are being discovered as having abused people, taking advantage of people, whether sexually, emotionally, financially. Not all the names are known, but I think people are beginning to share that information more. As a woman, and this might just be my own experience, and I certainly don't want to say that I would never trust a man as a practitioner, but I think I would feel the most comfortable with women. It's not a surefire, answer, but a group of women likely more safer than one practitioner alone, or like, two strangers than you in a room. So I love the community model. I love the group model. That being said, I did a women's retreat in Jamaica, and we still ran into lots of confusing dynamics. It was still hard for a lot of the women to feel safe. And that's where I go back to just, because there were a couple men around, and that was enough to be triggering, and it's hard to confirm that the entire space is exactly what every woman wants, every single individual of the 20 women. So I learned a lot from that experience. I think I would do smaller groups and really check in with each individual. Like, what are your expectations? Are you going to be, is it going to make you nervous to see someone walking in the vicinity of the ceremony who you haven't met before? Just like there are things that you can kind of work through. And I would say at Hopkins, the reason it worked so well is because people got to know us for, a couple months before their first experience. We were their friends. We weren't strange doctors. We weren't, one-off therapists. They really got to know us, and they could back out at any time. They knew that it was up to them whether they trusted us, not whether we decided they weren't ready. Again, hard to find in this kind of environment, But, certain communities are starting to create that through decriminalization. You get to know the same people over a period of months before you have a high dose experience with them.
Right. How many therapy sessions do you usually have before you do the medicine?
So at Hopkins, Mary or another clinician would interview people probably 2, 3, 4 times. Then they'd have a meeting with Roland. They'd go through the informed consent. They met the study coordinators. So there was a period of about a month of meeting lots of different medical team members and then getting medically cleared before they even had their first, guided. Yeah. And then there were 3 or 4 guide sessions before the first dose. So you've got several weeks worth of getting to know lots of different team members. And if at any point you're like, I don't feel comfortable, then we would delay, we would make sure that someone really felt ready. And it only happened a couple times where people got to the final prep session, that 3rd or 4th prep session. And they said, I want to be ready, but I just don't think I am. And there was no pressure, which I felt was kind of nice, considering that, it's difficult in science to lose a data point, but we wanted to make sure that people felt really ready. Yeah. So it's a lot of time. And I would say that in my own life, a couple people have asked me if I would help them get ready for their first mushroom experience. And one young man in particular, I met with him over phone and Zoom for a year. At the end of that year, he had learned to meditate. He was in therapy. He was learning all of this stuff about himself. And then he still put off the mushroom experience because he's like, I've already achieved at least half of what I thought the mushrooms would give me through meditation and therapy. So I consider that to be a success story. It's like put in the preparation and look at how much you can do just on your own, basically.
Right. Wow. Yeah, the preparation is very important. And that's one thing that's also big in our clinic is we do have the same staff all the time. It's not rotating, and the patients come in and they have that trust in us. We are all women, but that isn't always to say like, oh, that's the only reason that you're going to be safe. But I think that when you are in a vulnerable state with women, I think, it helps to have that support, be a woman as well in that space. But obviously I don't want to knock all the guys because there's so many men and therapists that are doing so much amazing work, But I think in the trauma, if you are working through trauma, especially certain things, like you want to feel safe.
Right.
Right. So having those prep sessions, I think, is important. So do you think those guides or those different centers are going to have those pre-meetings? Because I feel like they just travel and you meet them when you're there. I wonder if there's a way to...
Yeah, so I can again speak personally. I almost took a step into a totally new territory. I wanted to experience Iboga. And I was going to go down to Costa Rica in the winter, and there were prep sessions. I was getting to know the head practitioners. And then it was the last few weeks, and I just felt, you know what, I'm really not ready. And I said to them, the timing doesn't feel right. And I don't want to push this when it doesn't feel completely safe for me. And she was like, no problem. Let me know when you're ready to come back. There's no rush. We'll be here. We've got retreats happening all the time. And so, I kind of tested my own model on myself. And it was the first time in a while where I didn't just push through that wall and be like, I can do anything, I can get some meaning out of this, even if I'm afraid. I'm like, you know what? I'm just not ready. So that's okay. And, that same weekend that I had already set up time away, I ended up just doing a small amount of mushrooms. And got so much out of it because I'd done all the prep for the Iboga.
Right.
And so in a way, it's like the prep, I keep going back to that, but it's like preparation is so important. And depending on your belief system, I believe that an experience in the future can have effects rippling back into the past. And so you're sitting here moving toward a goal in the future. And I think psychedelics help kind of guide your path toward that future goal. So if you've already set an intention, it matters less how much or which medicine. It matters that you're already on this path, that, your sense of who you are is moving toward that future. And so with the preparation and intention, you can get so much mileage out of even a small dose or, a fun dose. It doesn't always have to be so hard.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. One of these days I will venture into the other. It's difficult in my space being a nurse practitioner, with all these medicines. Like I, have so much experience with ketamine, but has opened the doors to all these other medicines because I have had patients that ketamine can only go so far, right? And they're still struggling. So then I kind of guide them to like, okay, here's some research, here's this, go and frolic into the universe and good luck with other medicines, just kind of trying to help them, but also falling within my guidelines, of my
Sure.
license, right? So it's beautiful.
I know being not a clinician, I could take some more liberties with my book. I could really put myself out there. And I felt like that was one of the best offerings I could do from my experience is say some of the more controversial things, put it in print so that, doctors, nurses, researchers could learn and not have to take those risks themselves.
Exactly. No, and it's so important. That's why I loved the book. I actually reread it like a couple chapters here and there. Just because it was beautiful. I mean, first of all, I want to say like your husband is amazing for like being that support and being like, okay, I'll take the kids and you go do your trips and your journeys and your, everything that you needed. That's amazing. Yeah.
It is true. I've had between my mom and my husband, just this amazing support system. And now that the book is out, also learning which family members can walk with me and which family members are like, you've already gone beyond my comfort zone. Like, I don't know if I can keep walking with you. So it's really amazing to see like my mom, my brother, my husband saying like, yeah, like we're still honored to be walking with you. Which is another thing psychedelics can teach you, right? Is like the people in your life who is willing to keep going down a certain path with you, and which people might be more connected to a past version of who you used to be.
Oh, yes. Yeah, because that's very true. Once you start doing the medicine and the awareness comes, you can't go back to who you used to be with that knowledge, the awareness, the connection that the universe has. It's a beautiful thing that even with, just me having the ketamine experience, it's completely different. I look forward to the other realms of the world. Let's just say the transcended experiences, because it's true, like ketamine and all psychedelics are so healing and so eye-opening and just I think really it's just like letting go of the ego, right? Being able to just put it to the side and just seeing things for what they are and getting rid of those stories and the adventures. I don't know why I said adventures. He's going to delete that. I'm going to be silent for a second. Okay. All right. Well, it was so amazing to have you. I know that we could continue talking and more, and maybe I would actually, have you come on again for another little chat on more psychedelics or more, as you kind of talk and as more things become legalized and we can talk more freely about things. I would love to have you on since you are actually at the forefront. You started it all. So I love that.
Well, I hope this is just the beginning. I have even bigger dreams, and part of the intention of creating this offering through Midnight Water was to lay the foundation for some of the visions that I've had in my own life with family members and giving that to a broader community. So through birth and death and a lot of the benefits that I've experienced, it would be amazing to see that proliferate through other communities.
No, that would be amazing. I think with death, I think, when you're seeing all these, as firsthand, right, with the loss and just in the preparation, but even just the family, like you having to go through it with your sister and your father, but then also them, right, them being okay with it, even though they didn't partake. I know you offered
right
experience and they were like, nope, it was all you, all you on your side doing the work. But I think it would be very beautiful for families to be able to have that closure and have that oneness and just to be able to have that healing, with those psychedelics. So I look forward to the work that you're going to do because I saw little hints of what your future plans are. So I definitely would like to bring you back on when you have those things come to fruition. So,
well, thank you. Now we said it out loud. The intention is set. So I'm just tracking toward a future version of myself. 20 years from now, who knows?
All right. Beautiful. And I look forward to being there. Cheer you on. Girl power, the original OG. Everyone, it was a pleasure to have you listen to us tonight. You are listening to Dr. Katherine McLean, and she had just released her book, Midnight Water, a Psychedelic Memoir. It is very moving, educational, and really love and grief all rolled into one with a lot of psychedelics in there. So everyone have a beautiful evening, and I will see you next time. Bye.
The opinions expressed on this CannabisRadio.com program are those of the guests and hosts and do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of CannabisRadio.com. Any rebroadcast, republication, or retransmission of this program without proper consent is prohibited.